most importantly, I was just seeing those little data points, those 1 to 2% increases day after day after day, that really do have a cumulative effect.
Hey there, friends and neighbors. You're listening to the Well Rested Podcast, episode number 53 Exciting Sleep Transformation. I'm your host, Dr. Joshua Lennon. Wouldn't it be great to feel excited about going to bed every night? Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around after our brief hiatus. We're back with all new episodes of the podcast and some exciting news with a very exciting announcement in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. As always, please click subscribe in your favorite podcast player to get all the latest episodes. Leave us a review and head over to wellrestedmd.com for more information. And I do have a free downloadable for you. So if you head over to wellrestedmd.com/day, you can get a free cheat sheet to a day in the life of the well-rested, including some specific best practices to get that good snooze. That's wellrestedmd.com/day. Today's show has a bit of a different format. In this week's episode, I sit down with a special guest, Ryan, to talk with him about his journey to waking up well-rested. You'll hear his story, beginning with a not terrible sleep experience, but the sense that something just wasn't right. Several years ago, he did see a sleep specialist, but after finding that there wasn't anything terribly wrong, he headed down one path after another of prescription and over-the-counter interventions in search of sleeping better, but never finding the relief he was seeking. Then, with the pandemic bringing health concerns back to the forefront, he again sought professional sleep health, this time with a different specialist, and did end up finding something that worked for him. So before we dive into the conversation, in the show notes you'll find a link to sleepeducation.org, where you can just drop in your address, city, or zip code and find all the closest accredited sleep centers near you if you think you're ready to take the next step and see a sleep professional. In the show notes you can also find the link to the prescription-only device that Ryan finally found success with, a device called the eXciteOSA, which was just approved by the FDA in the late winter of 2021. And finally, the conversation was recorded on my office computer via a virtual call, so please forgive the sound quality. So with that, let me introduce to you Ryan. All right, so I'm pleased to be joined by Ryan here today. And so Ryan, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about, how you ended up in this situation, what was going on in your life that made you think maybe there was a problem that needed to be addressed?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. When COVID began, it began to accelerate a lot of the sleeping anxieties that I had been developing for many years, many of which had began both during and after law school, being a practicing attorney. And so one of the things that I didn't really have a choice with, I guess, I could have chosen to gone my existing life, waking up, not sleeping well, and having a wife who's mad at me for the snoring, or I could decide to be a little bit healthier and have a much happier wife. And so I began looking for some explanations as to why I was not sleeping in the way that I wanted to, why I was waking up feeling sometimes, frankly, worse than I did the night before. And that led me to seek out some sleep doctors and look at various alternatives.
So how long had this problem kind of been brewing and developing, both that you had noticed and your wife's concerns, before you finally said, okay, enough is enough, and I'm going to go seek some help?
Well, we'd actually gone to seek some help. I'd gone to seek some help about maybe 4 years ago, and at the time, it was recommended that I get an oral device, and it was recommended just to try one over the counter. So I went through the Amazon reviews and went through a variety of different ones. Even tried some weird nose plugs with baffling on them. It looked really weird. I looked like Aquaman, I guess, from time to time. And so we had tried, there had been steps, everything never got better. It just always seemed that as I got older and a little bit heavier, that I was sort of beating the devices themselves.
So, you felt like you weren't sleeping that great. Your wife is concerned about snoring. You feel like you're not waking all that well. And what kind of assessment did they do when 4 years ago, when you did see a sleep doctor? And did they talk to you about anything except for sleep apnea, or that was kind of like the one track mind that they had at that point?
What was interesting is that they actually performed a sleep apnea test on me, and I came up negative. It wasn't even inconclusive. They just said, "You don't have sleep apnea. You don't have restless leg." And so the next alternative was, and I quote, a very painful surgery of enlarging my nostrils with a scalpel. That sounded fine to my wife, I guess. Maybe like the first 30 seconds she thought of it, and then she was just like, yeah, never mind. I'm not going to make him go through that. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go through the complications of that. And it just seemed like something that was extraordinarily unnecessary if I did not have sleep apnea. So it felt like there was something in the interim. But as we've said, the last 2 years have just kind of been a change for a lot of us, and many things got put off by the wayside.
And so, in your endeavors, I mean, did they ever direct you to like a sleep dentist? Had you heard of those things before? They just said, hey, maybe think about a mouth guard, and you just kind of did your own research for that.
I got very lucky because our dentist, our family practitioner, she actually develops mouth guards for sleep doctors around the Columbus, Ohio area. And so what I had gone to her, we talked about a variety of different options, and there was one particular model that she directed me to. Small, it was thin. It looked nice. It looked really comfortable. It looks like what like Pat Mahomes or one of the quarterbacks would wear. And I thought it was going to be great. But still, at the end of the day, putting millimeters between your teeth at night and having devices attached to your teeth themselves, I would wake up sometimes with unnecessary teeth pain, a little bit of TMJ, or just altogether, I felt like I was becoming reliant upon a device because I forgot at one time prior to a vacation and tried to convince my wife to wear earplugs on the vacation for her satisfaction was a non-starter. So
it's a tough sell.
Just had to be much more careful about it.
And so, for anyone who hasn't worn one of these devices, it protrudes the jaw forward, and so you have sort of your resting jaw position where your teeth are relatively aligned. And these mouth guards, they are mouth guards. They grip onto your upper and your lower teeth, and it uses your upper teeth as basically the anchor to thrust forward your jaw. And when the jaw is pulled forward, it pulls all the contents of the mouth, like the tongue, with it to open up some space behind the tongue, so that when the tongue does relax, it's not falling backwards and causing some collapse of the airway and leading to obstructed airflow and then the noise of snoring. And so in order to get that effect from these mouth guards, it's not just as opposed to say people that grind their teeth, you're not trying to protect the teeth against themselves. You're literally trying to use the teeth as a point of torque to move the jaw in a whole new position that it's not naturally going to go into. Did you find any discomfort during the wear itself, or was it more like the next morning you'd wake up and have some TMJ issues?
It's a really good question, because when I look back, the discomfort wasn't necessarily there. It was the aching that I would have in the morning for the prolonged use throughout the night. But it was just going to bed with the feeling of a hard plastic object in your mouth. Feeling like at any point, a defensive linebacker would run out and jump at you. Was just kind of the feeling of it. And it was not something that I necessarily enjoyed going to bed with. And at the same time, not to mention, when you brush your teeth and things like that at night, and all of a sudden you're shrouding it in plastic, it also just doesn't feel the most sanitary.
Yeah, it doesn't smell that great in the morning either.
I know, TMI, but it's relevant to all of us.
That's right.
And especially if you have a spouse.
Yeah. So, you're going through all this rigmarole, you're trying all these different devices. Nothing is really all that satisfying. Did you end up going back to the sleep clinic at any point, during all these struggles, to try to find if they had some secret sauce you didn't know about that could help you out?
This is where I got really lucky. I know I previously mentioned I'm a startup attorney, and so what we focus on primarily a lot of like venturable companies. And so we had somebody come to us. We had a couple group of doctors who are in the sleep space for an entirely different product that they were working on. Something hopefully you cover someday. But back to what they were doing. They were working on this product. I really liked one of the doctors in particular. They were all great, but there was this one who we just started talking about it one time, and he was like, "Come on in. I think I know what's going on with you, but I want to do these tests." And so I'd reached out to him. It was an entirely new, fresh take at I was in an entirely different health system. We didn't go back to the old charts. He wanted to make a brand new assessment all on his own. And I liked that because I felt like I wasn't putting ideas into somebody's head and having them work back or forward from that, but just getting a clear, objective analysis of what was going on.
That's great. And so you had mentioned before that they did a daytime test as well. Did they say, what this combination was looking for, what they were trying to rule out at that point?
It was generally the nighttime test that they were trying to look that they were looking at in particular for the apnea. I don't exactly understand the science, and my doctor's going to have to. Maybe he was just trying to torture me since he was a paying client by keeping me there an extra half a day with all the electrodes. But what I did realize was that I was able to go through, I believe they were doing some anxiety tests and things like that. And so they were also able to eliminate a couple of other factors to make sure that there wasn't anything else going on more than the obstruction.
And so at that point, did they say, as opposed to 4 years ago, was there any sleep apnea, or again, things looked pretty good? It was just what they called primary snoring.
So he gave me four options, and it was very clever on his part. And it was kind of just the degree of severity on many of them. He talked surgical options. He talked the do nothing at all option, which he said would probably not be very good for my marriage. And I know a lot of your listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. Both male and female, we don't want to suffer from it. If it was our other partner, we want them to find relief. And so that was a non-starter. Then it came down to the CPAP machines, and he had some thoughts on the CPAP machines. I had some thoughts on the CPAP machines. I was also concerned. My wife is a very light sleeper. I was concerned about having a CPAP machine in the room and thinking that while this is going to work for me, is it just continuing the issue for her? And then he finally said, now, and he pulled up to the camera on the Zoom, he pulled up the device. He said, I know you're probably asking yourself, what the heck is that? He brought up this little wishbone looking device. And I said, what the heck is that? And he said, this was just approved by the FDA within the last week. Now, the timing on this is actually pretty cool. I know he was probably a little annoyed that I had to put off our very first sleep study, but had I done that sleep study, I probably would have been 8 to 10 weeks removed from knowing about this device. It probably went in, purchased an expensive CPAP machine, and had gone through the traditional therapy that one in the space would receive when they've been diagnosed with such a diagnosis. But luckily for me, the obstruction was also relative. It was mild to moderate, but it was moderate enough to warrant the look at a CPAP machine. But also, at least in my situation, was moderate or mild enough that he thought that this would actually be able to demonstrate some more immediate results for me.
So what you're referring to is a new device that just got approved earlier this year called the eXciteOSA, and it's the first FDA-approved treatment of neuromuscular electrical stimulation. What was the explanation that he gave? I mean, he showed you this funny object. What was his pitch? I mean, how did he say? How did this make sense? Because sometimes things that are brand new, that might be unproven. Sometimes you got to be a little bit of a cowboy to jump after some of these things. So what did he say that kind of convinced you to try this out?
He played every single heartstring. He knew exactly, who I was, exactly what I wanted to do. And when he had introduced the eXciteOSA to me, he said, this is brand new. This is some really exciting technology. I'm also a cyclist, which he was like, when you go to your chiropractor, are you doing any electrostimulator therapy with regards to both the relaxing and the strengthening of your muscles? He said the concept was, by and large, very much the same. That it was an alternative to the breathing machines, but it was also the use of new technology, and also knowing just in general how our bodies respond to electrical stimuluses. I was sold right off the bat because I thought this would be something that could actually get much deeper down than just even a mouth guard attached to a couple teeth, that we could actually look at some underlying muscular issues.
One of the very unique things about this particular device is that it's the only treatment for snoring and sleep disorder breathing that's not utilized during the act of sleeping itself.
Once he played the early adopter heartstring, then he started getting into the practicalities of it. And in particular was the daytime therapy option. Actually, that daytime therapy option, but the fact that this is geared towards being used during the daytime, that this is not something that you would have to wear to bed, that this is not something that would interfere through any of your rolling or sticking out or obstructing or otherwise causing any discomfort, but that it was a sleep therapy that I could do on my schedule at a time of my choosing. And that was something that I really was very interested in because in my line of work, just, as with many, many others, our schedules are often pretty unpredictable. But most importantly, being able to do the therapy around the times that I wanted to, knowing I would have the evening clear, was really, really enticing for me.
We have a lot of challenges in the medical community getting people to stick to something, to make a habit of taking a pill twice a day or once a day, or using a device for their sleep every single night. And the concern is always that if there's not like a strict schedule, like take this every day with lunch or use this every time when you sleep, that we as humans may be even more prone to forget or have lapses. Did you have any challenges trying to find that optimal time of day, or did you switch it up a little bit? Have you found what time of day works better or worse? I mean, because it's not a huge commitment. It's to be used for 20 minutes a day. It's a 20-minute session. But sometimes finding a consistent 20-minute block of time, can be challenging.
I'm constantly being bombarded by text messages, emails, Slacks, you name it. And so being able to actually block out something, and I know it took me, to the right, to my 40s to actually even find the comfort and confidence of doing this. But I was starting to schedule no call times, where I was just, being able to deep dive into my emails, et cetera. And I began realizing that I could also use those times to be able to conduct therapy. And more often than not, that happened, right around this time, right around towards the end of the day, but prior to what I would be socializing with my family, cooking dinner, et cetera. So I would use it at the end of my wind down day. And at the same time, there was also something meditative about it because of the 20-minute timer on it. I liked being able to know that I had the 20 minutes. And I also found in a really weird way, just sitting down, I was a little bit more focused in other ancillary productivity. I do adopt the kind of mindfulness part of it, and it gave me a little bit of time to be mindful and just sort of focus on myself at the end of the day.
And did you find that you needed to use a reminder or timer or an alarm or something, or because you had structured your day in this way that it kind of naturally fit into this end of the day transition routine between the workday and getting back to home?
That's a really good question. In particular, because at the beginning of it, I did rely on the push notifications to remind me that it was time for a session. After I was able to get through the initial 4 weeks of the use of the device and began seeing immediate results, most importantly, I was sleeping better. I was waking with less anxiety. The twice a week seemed very much like a de minimis requirement for something that was extremely non-invasive in my life. The convenience of it just cannot be understated. The convenience comes in a variety of different forms. Being able to do it at a time of your choosing, allowing it to be something that you can just carry into your pocket, you can do it in your office behind closed doors. All of those things really enabled me to be able to continue the therapy at a time of my choosing, rather than having to work around the device itself.
And so you mentioned that you felt like you were resting better, you felt better in the morning, your mood was better. At what point did your wife start to get on the bandwagon and feel like maybe this was a good idea? Because unlike, say, other treatments, whether it's an oral appliance or a CPAP, where a single use, a single night, there's a definitive benefit there, even if there some tweaks need to happen. With this device, so it's more of a training, right? This device really helps improve the endurance of the muscles of the airway, especially of the tongue. And that over time, just like going to the gym, over time, as you strengthen and improve the endurance of that muscle, you start to get results. And it's not necessarily, and almost never, after the first night. So when did she start to notice some differences?
One of the really cool things about the device was that my wife and I, both being naturally kind of competitive, healthy people, we both like to get up to the gym in the morning. But I was often finding that I was having a little bit more time for excuse, due to the lack of sleep, due to some anxieties, worrying about, if I didn't sleep last night and I go to the gym, I'm going to be tired for this meeting. And so I think she began to see and really respond to it when she saw that I was feeling much more motivated in the morning, waking up at 4:30 for that 5 o'clock gym class, with much more ease and doing it more frequently. And I think she really began to notice it when I was going to the store to buy new clothes because I was losing weight. I was going from a large to a medium. And while I cannot directly attribute that to this device, I will say it helped contribute to that type of lifestyle because I was more energetic. I had more clarity of thought. And at the end of the day, anxiety breeds self-doubt, and therefore I had less of that.
I think you hit a very important point, which is it is a lifestyle. And I think the common symbol for sleep and sleep medicine is yin yang, that it's not just about what happens in the dark at night, because that has a heavy influence on what happens during the daytime. What happens during the day influences what happens at night. And so even just getting 10% better sleep at night, you get a little bit more energy during the day, and you start to exercise. The better you exercise, the better that you sleep, the more you exercise, the better your mood, the more likely you're to feel motivated to go back to the gym again. And it can start to snowball in a very positive way. All just, the scales were tipped by, just getting some slightly better sleep night after night after night. So that's really, it really is a remarkable thing to see and to experience as well.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that, because it reminds me of something that you and I have heard many times before, and that is, if you watch your pennies, your dollars take care of themselves. If we're looking at 100% optimal sleep and you're getting 80% or even 75%, and you're able to increase that to 85, 90%, which I was able to see on my sleep tracker, that I was sleeping with less agitation. I was waking up significantly less often. Sometimes I was waking up 8, 10 times a night, just agitated for no apparent reason. And I understood that that was relating to some obstruction that I was dealing with. Without that appliance in my mouth, and with using the eXciteOSA device, through its simplicity, through the UX, through everything, I knew that it was working. I knew that I was on schedule. It was tracking me. My doctor was able to monitor it. And so I knew that I was using it correctly. But most importantly, I was just seeing those little data points, those 1% to 2% increases day after day after day, that really do have a cumulative effect, especially if you're working in, a high-pitched, high-paced environment. Or if you're somebody who, and, for me, one of the things I thought about with CPAP was, I travel. How am I going to travel with this? You could literally throw the OSA into the smallest of your carry-ons, and you have your sleep therapy traveling with you at a time that you want to use it for. So it was a cumulative thing that just gave a lot of answers that I was looking for out of sleep therapy and sleep devices in a very, very small package.
So it sounds like you're doing great now. And do you feel like you've kind of reached the plateau? You've hit peak. You're going to stop now, or where do you see yourself going forward? Because some people, it's like they view a lot of things in medicine like a course of antibiotics. I'll finish my 7 days and then I'm done.
Then you're done.
What about you? What's your outlook on, in the future for how you're going to address your sleep and maintain it?
Well, one of the things that I learned when I was actually going through my second process of having my sleep analyzed, was I learned the phrase sleep hygiene. And I realized that we don't just get up and brush our teeth in the morning as part of our hygiene process. That's not the be all of our hygiene process. There are many other things that you have to do that cumulatively make us, not smell like the underbelly of, New York City subway car. In this particular case, I began looking at a variety of different things. And believe it or not, it actually had me looking at diet. It had me looking at wine consumption. I love a glass of red wine at night. And it made me realize even how much small little things like that played an overarching role in my sleep therapy and my overall sleep hygiene. And so it played just a very interesting part, albeit a technical one, of getting me to look at a much larger issue with regards to my sleep. And I'm pretty grateful I did it, because at the end of the day, I've talked about the convenience of it. I've talked about its simplicity. And those are the types of things that make you not want to run away from a product, but rather embrace the product, look at the science behind it, and be able to say, okay, this is not too bad. Actually, it's enjoyable. It works. When I say enjoyable, it is enjoyable in the fact that you can feel it working. It's working when your tongue is being electrostimulated, and that through that electrostimulation that you were doing something that is actually strengthening your tongue. And so again, as I said, it was just something that helped me understand the much larger picture of what I needed to do to sleep better. And so it became just one more part of me discovering kind of a better me, more patient, less anxious, as I've described before, working out more often, and then overall just healthier person.
Sounds like it's been really transformational. Have you felt like this has started to rub off on people around you? Because, clearly it's not just about what happens when your eyes are closed. It really is impacting your entire life, and how you look at health and well-being as a whole, not just what happens under the sheets. Have you felt like evangelizing and trying to get those around you to either be assessed or take a closer look at how their diet impacts their sleep, or how sleep might impact their exercise or their mood or their relationships?
Absolutely. We have a group of dads, many of us that are close to our community here, and we share a lot of information with one another. I mean, not TMI, nothing like that, but we do share practicalities. And being the kind of early adopter tech geek that I am, I did tell my friends about it, and it was pretty interesting because two of them DM'd me back, on the WhatsApp and just said, tell me a little bit more about this. I want to find out about this device. And that made me realize that I think we're having a much bigger problem of talking about, sleep. Sometimes it's taboo to talk about what happens in one's own bedroom, what bothers your partner, et cetera. But I actually find that it's kind of liberating when you talk to people and you say, this is a solution that's not your grandfather or your father's solution. You're not going to have to wear a large, like pizza mask on your face at night. I don't even know what a pizza mask is, but they look like that when you put them on. It's large enough. At the end of the day, I did find that when I started speaking out about it, other people started speaking out about it. And I think that is, I hope, something that sticks with our times. I hope people are beginning to recognize what does lead to better health, both emotionally and intellectually, the EQ and the IQ. And so when I did speak to people about it, as I said, people who were otherwise reluctant to talk about it before were curious at the new alternatives that were on the market. And I think it came on the market also at a very, very good time when people are looking for solutions and are looking for feeling a little bit less anxious.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, this year has been a little crazier than most, not just because of the pandemic, but like every industry, there's a tremendous logistical constraints, supply chain issues that are impacting the delivery and availability of all sorts of treatments within medicine. And there was a major manufacturer issued a recall for one of their CPAP devices or a family of their devices over the summer. And so there's been an increasing need, not just a push, but a real need to look closer at alternatives to CPAP to treat sleep disordered breathing, whether it's simple snoring or whether it's obstructive sleep apnea. And so, everyone may respond a little bit differently and we'll have different preferences. And the more options we have out there, the better. And certainly the eXciteOSA, this neuromuscular stimulator, I think is a great new option. But a lot of people do get success with oral appliances by shifting the jaw forward. That can help a lot of people. So a lot of people do, love their CPAP machines. There are surgeries that can be quite helpful. And in fact, there's a weird hybrid of kind of what the eXciteOSA does in a typical surgery, which is what's called a hypoglossal nerve stimulator, where it looks like a little pacemaker implanted in the chest, and there's wires that go up to the tongue. And as opposed to the eXciteOSA, which helps to train the tongue while you're awake so that it functions better while you're asleep, these devices, they stimulate your tongue directly during a breath to move the tongue out of the way, and then it pulls back the voltage, and then the tongue can slide back out of place. But sort of accomplishing the similar outcome of keeping the airway open. So there certainly are a lot of options that are out there, more that come out all the time. And so I'd certainly encourage, anyone, who might be listening, that have heard Ryan's story, that, if you feel like you're not as sharp as you want to be, if your bed partner feels like you're not as sharp as you ought to be, and, there's something is happening that might be impacting the rest of your day-to-day life, that, there are lots of resources out there. And sometimes, looking over the counter can lead to success. And sometimes you need a trusted advisor, like a board certified sleep dentist, or certainly a board certified sleep physician. And there's plenty of sleep centers all around the country. And as Ryan alluded to, this device came out early this year. It is FDA approved. It is approved to treat snoring and sleep apnea. And so, if you feel like you might be in need, then certainly reach out, because there are a lot of options out there, and one of them might just work for you, even if the first handful didn't. Like it didn't work for Ryan, that eventually he did find success with this device, and thousands of people have as well. Any final parting words before we hang up, Ryan?
I just want to say everything that you said. This is all a rainbow of both of the spectrums and the severities that we all have to deal with. But if you're in the position like myself, and you're looking for, I'm a naturalist. I want to be able to sleep without anything in my mouth at night, and which I know at the end of the day, anybody with obstructive sleep apnea, we'd like to avoid the machines. We'd like to avoid the pacemaker. That was an option that also went through, and even for me, it just felt like losing a little bit of my autonomy to this issue. I like this one because it just strengthens your body's natural mechanisms to be able to use. And therefore, at the end of the night, I got to go to bed, brush my teeth, have my drink of water, wake up the next morning, and I still tasted Listerine in my mouth, and it was fantastic.
What a wonderful conclusion. Well, Ryan, thank you so very much for your time and for sharing your story. And I hope that you've inspired many of our listeners to act as you have and take steps to improve their lives.
Thank you so much, Joshua. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.